first item is the fire assessment fee. Mr. Green, you're going to present on this?
I am.
Okay, very good.
Get some practice in. I never get to do this anymore, so. I thought we would take some time and basically, we had to ask, some of the commissioners had asked to kind of walk through how we got where we are. So this kind of presentation is just kind of give you a little history, talk about how a fire assessment fee works, and then talk about what the proposal is going to be at the August 26th meeting. So we'll start off with, what exactly is a fire assessment fee? Fire assessment fee, unlike a tax, so there's basically two main ways you can look at doing cost recovery. There's a tax, and when you tax someone, that money is basically not allocated for any specific purpose generally. Generally, when you do a tax, that money can be used for any lawful purpose that's been established by the legislature. Special assessments, on the other hand, are set up in a way so that they in effect are cost recovery. And they have to be set up so that they're cost recovery against real property. So, for example, you couldn't have a police fire fee, or excuse me, a police service fee, because generally what the police do is they generally respond to incidents, they deal with people, not necessarily property owners. So fire assessment fees, much like, and I'm going to use the example of a stormwater fee, which is, we create a fund for stormwater, and we add up the costs of providing stormwater service citywide, and then we divide that by the number of parcels in the city, and there's methodologies that you use, but the concept is the same. You basically are trying to figure out a way to recover the cost of providing a service over the real property that benefits from that service. And so a fire assessment fee works the same way. So again, it's not a tax. It can be mandatory, though. You collect it on the tax roll, much like a tax, but it's done as a calculation against real property. And so again, this particular slide just talks about the concept of why a fire assessment fee is lawful, because it's providing fire service, and you're taking the cost of providing that fire service and dividing it by the real property that it benefits. So why charge one? Why not just do a tax? You've probably seen this slide before. This is one of my favorite slides, because when you look at our budget every year, not a lot of people realize that the total cost of just the police and fire spending in the city is around now $108 million. And the total property taxes that we collect citywide is only $82 million. So there's a $25 million gap between all the property taxes that are generated citywide and just the cost of providing police and fire. It's a very, very difficult situation. A lot of cities face this, and that's what we have to deal with when we look at how do we fund the city and make sure that not only police and fire get taken care of, but the city as a whole. So what a lot of cities do, we're not unique in this, is that they supplement the fire department budget by trying to recover some of the costs of providing fire service against the properties that benefit from that. So this is an example of several cities. I will tell you, for the cities that we've looked at, we have one of the lowest. Even with the proposed rate that we're going to talk about in a little bit, we will still be one of the lowest with respect to fire fees. Now, one of the things one of the things that pushbacks that I've heard in some of these meetings are, well, the county doesn't charge a fire assessment fee. Why do we have to do that? Realize that the county fire department has 3.5 mils of tax revenue specifically dedicated for that service. So if you live in an unincorporated area or an area that the county fire service provides you service, you get a tax on your tax bill for 3.5 mils specifically to cover fire services. We don't have that in the city. We have one millage rate, and it covers everything in the city, not just the fire department. I wanted Diana, go ahead.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Jeff. Just to clarify that, so are you saying that only if you're in those unincorporated areas that you'll be assessed that?
Yes, like for example, our residents don't get charged for the county fire fee because they don't provide that service.
Okay, great, thank you.
There she is. I'm going to let her talk on the next couple of slides.
Okay, Diana Matty, Fire Chief. Just some of our needs, as laid out in this slide in particular. For the past 10 years, we've seen a dramatic increase in call volume. When I started in 1994, we were running about 14,000 calls. We're now around 28,000 calls. So over 25 years, it's quite an increase. And just 48% since 2008. Many of our fire trucks are, exceeding their lifespan. We didn't buy fire trucks and we didn't hire for about a 5-year period due to the recession. Our current response time for July of this year, we just got those numbers in, is 6 minutes and 31 seconds. So if you think about how our service is delivered, that number is only going to get worse if our trucks are breaking down, if there's more construction downtown, and we don't have units in service available to respond to those calls, for whether they're on another call, whether there's issues with how they get there, whether the truck's not starting. So, and some of the western communities, this is an average response time. Downtown might be a little bit faster, but other places, it's definitely longer than that.
Chief, before you
Yes, sir.
move off of that, how does this compare to previous years? Is this more time? The 6 minutes and 31 seconds.
It is more travel time. A couple years ago, we made a real push to improve our turnout time, which is a portion of total response time. Turnout time is the time it takes you to get from inside the living quarters to the wheels going around on the truck and moving down the road. So we did everything we could to make that 1 minute, where we had seen some longer times just out of, for whatever reason. You're cleaning, you're doing this, you've got a truck you're practicing with. We really work hard now and have for the past several years to really push that turnout time, because that's what we can control. That little portion is what we can control. We can't control traffic. We can't control whether the truck starts or doesn't, or how far away the emergency is from us, or what other emergencies are going on at the same time. But that piece in particular has gotten better. So I would say it's less, but our travel time is increasing just due to, we have a thriving city, and the more people that come in, the longer it's going to take to navigate through the city streets.
But so we're comparing apples and apples. What was our average response time, say, 5 years ago?
I would say in the 8s
Okay.
for certain areas. If you're talking about the western community where we didn't have Station 9 in service at Roebuck and Haverhill, that was a previous area that was underserved, and the population's increasing, and the department saw a need under Chief Cabrera to put a station in service out there, and we did. And in just that area alone, by putting that truck in service, we saw a 2-minute improvement in response time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
so quick follow-up to that. Does that response timing, does it take into account calls that are within our city, or does it also take into account calls that are outside of the city through the automatic, response through the county?
It incorporates Mangonia Park, since we deliver service to them as their primary. However, we get the reports from Palm Beach County Dispatch just in our city. We can assess those outside of city limits when we're providing mutual aid, but these are specific to inside city limits.
Okay, and just one follow-up. If I understand correctly, we're regularly called outside of our city through that automatic response closest unit dispatch through Palm Beach County, correct?
Correct. There are certain service areas, for example, Gramercy Park, Golden Lakes Village, where we are first due, even though it's county area, but that's part of the location issue. We can't just drive past a call that's across the street from the fire station just because it's in the county. So,
I understand.
yes, sir. Any other questions? Okay, so aging fire station. So Station 4 was just completed. It's now in service. That was built in 1960, so that's been something that has been in the works for a long time. Station 8 was an area that we've been running in a trailer for over 12, 13 years. Finally have a hard station out there. We have not had a training facility since I've been on the job. So they sold it in the early 90s. I started in 1994 and we were training in the road. We're still training in the road. So it's rather dangerous. We have to find little corners of the city that, there's not a lot of traffic, cone it off. And the old training facility is over at Okeechobee and 95. It's a tower. So the DOT bought that years ago. So we haven't had a fire training facility. And again, we have to meet the needs of this growing city because we have to deal with so many more things than we did when it was just a fire department and we ran car accidents and some medical calls and kind of handled a normal city call volume. Now, the city has done a great job of, developing and economically to be a thriving city. We have high rises. We have, the president is visiting the town of Palm Beach regularly, and we have all of the other issues that come along with that on our side of the bridge. Not to mention the special events. They've increased 300% in the last several years. So every special event that has, certain parameters gets medics. So, we're trying to keep pace with something that's ahead of us. So, any questions on this? So one of the things we're trying to do to meet those needs and to keep pace with what's going on in our world today is to improve our ISO rating. It's like we were a C student, we applied, we made some improvements, we became a B student. Our goal is to be A students. We want to be a class 1 fire department. And that says that we have great staffing, our stations are in the right locations, we don't have a bunch of areas in our city that are underserved, and that's going to result in less response time, so we'll be able to get to the calls faster, and lower insurance rates for the community. So what ISO is, the Insurance Services Office rates a fire department, and your homeowner's insurance, your business fire insurance is based on that ISO rate and the proximity to hydrants. So if we go from being a C student over a 3-year period to now being, what we're striving for is to be A students, you're going to see, I can't tell you exactly what that number will be, but you'll see a reduction in your insurance. That's the goal. You can see where we were before 2017 in the 70 to 79. We're currently in the 80 to 89 percentile or points, and then our goal is up at the top.
Thank you, Chief.
And I'll echo that. I mean, again, the whole purpose of why this fee makes sense is so that we can create a fire network, a fire department that keeps our insurance rates low and protects the community. And that's, again, why this is so important.
Yes, Madam President.
Thank you. Quick question about the insurance. Do we know if a resident has to apply for that on their own, or does the city, once we reach that A rating, does the city send that to the headquarters of all insurance companies?
Yeah, when the underwriters look at it, it's kind of like your floodplain. When we change the flood zones and things like that, it's relayed to the underwriters, and they'll know it. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Peduzzi?
Yeah, my understanding is it's automatic. Once ISO rates a given area, then your insurance is automatically looking at that rating before they give you a quote. And it really does directly affect the amount you pay in insurance. And I was just wondering if we could get a copy of that ISO rating chart citywide. And I noticed that some of the western communities are as high as an 8. And, that's got to have a significant impact on the insurance costs. It's great that the ones that are in the 1 or 2.
Say western communities are the.
Okay.
Oh, were you talking about that
Was
previous
that,
slide?
yeah, what was that previous slide? I saw.
Fire station.
That's the number of the
Okay,
fire
never-
station. I
okay,
didn't have
good.
a clip art with a cute little firehouse on it.
I was thinking when I first glanced at it, those are the ISO ratings in those different areas.
No.
Okay.
That's
Thank
the
you.
number of the fire station geographically.
So geographically, does the ISO rating differ from those individual areas in the city, or the city as a whole have an ISO rating?
The city as a whole is a 2, and then there's sub areas that are a different grade on the other side, and that has to do with distance from a paved road and distance from a fire hydrant.
Okay.
So it kind of depends.
Okay.
Most of our city has a good hydrant system, and most of our city is on paved road,
Okay. Thank you.
especially in Ibis. Paved roads.
Thank you. That's a relief.
Plug for Ibis there.
All right, so how is the charge determined? So now that we know that we can charge it, how do we actually do the calculation? Well, basically, you start with figuring out service delivery. You take the fire department budget, and I'm going to break this down in the next slides. This is kind of a summary. You take the call data, and you break the call data down into the type of business it is. Is it residential? Is it commercial? Is it industrial? And then you divide it out. It's not a hard calculation when all's said and done. So the first step is to break up the fire department budget because, as I told you, special assessments have to be beneficial to the property. So pretty much half of what the fire department does is EMS related, which is taking people to the hospital and back and forth. So we take that portion of the budget away. So as you can see in yellow, that leaves about 54% of the fire department budget. And it's about $20.5 million. That is the assessable cost that theoretically you could charge through a special assessment or a fire assessment fee. You also look at the capital costs that you've incurred related to fire prevention, not EMS. So when you look at fire trucks, you look at equipment that's specifically designed to benefit fire prevention, and you look at the fire stations and what those cost. And I'll come back to this in a little bit. Then you take the call volume, and we did a study back in 2015. We did a study in 2008. We revised it again, and these are the percentages that you can see of the call volume. So if you have $20 million worth of assessable costs and 54% of the calls are residential, 54% of the costs of the fire assessment fee will be borne by the residential user. So that's the calculation here. Now, again, it's kind of hard to see, and I don't go into a lot of detail, but this basically takes what I've just said. It takes the $20.5 million, it divides it out by the type of property, and says what the maximum fee you could charge is. You don't have to charge the maximum. You don't have to recover all $20 million, but the study would allow you to go up to that amount to recover those costs because you can prove how they were set up and who benefited from that service. Right now, our current rates...
Mr. Green, if you don't mind, Commissioner Schoaf has a question.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Green. On the previous slide that you had, understanding that we went from 2008, where we had the initial fire assessment fee, to just last year when the initial increase was, and understanding that the maximum rates are not the proposed 2019, 2020 rates, at what point can the citizens take a look back and say, okay, right now we're at $100 per dwelling unit, the max is $231. Is there an expectation level that's going to be 2020, 2021? You know, at what point can we set the standard that says we're collecting enough revenue, understanding from your previous slides there's never enough revenue, and certainly, you know, everyone's supportive of making sure that when you dial 911, fire and police can show up at your door. But from a standpoint residentially, and I add another caveat that in some of the historic neighborhoods, I personally have 2 dwelling units on my home, and so, you know, that will double the fire assessment fee for some. So at what point can the residents have a little bit more predictability to say, this is the last year fire assessments are going up? Can they?
Well, again, you know, I am not the policy code. That's for you to do. I would argue that technically we can charge 10 mils on our property tax rate, but we haven't. So, you know, you have that ability. You have the ability to go to $230. You know, that's a call that you make. We provide you a budget. We tell you what we need to spend. You know, again, you have to decide if that's a good balance, or if you send it back to the staff and say, no, we need to cut things.
Understood from that perspective. Is there a rationale from a staff perspective of why the double increase this year as compared to?
Yes, I'll go through that when we get done.
I'm jumping ahead?
Yeah, you're jumping
Okay.
ahead. Always trying to get ahead of me. So again, while we're allowed to charge $231 a unit, our current rate is $50, and you can see the other rates per square foot. A little bit of a history, you know, this was first discussed back in 2008 when it was set up. At the time, much like you were saying, Commissioner Sho, there was a rate that was a maximum that could be established, and the commission at the time said, we're going to keep that at a very small number. It was originally $25 per residential unit, and it did not change for over 10 years. It stayed at that rate. It generated about $2 million a year, which actually helped us on fire trucks and miscellaneous maintenance and equipment that was purchased to supplement the fire department budget. Last year, we raised the rate to $50 per residential unit, and if you were, as you recall that conversation, a lot of the reasoning behind that was we were bringing on 2 new fire stations. We needed to bring on Station 9. All the things that Diana had already came up here and talked about, the need to get the trucks on a faster replacement cycle. We've gone, 10 years through the recession, not getting our vehicles back onto the schedule we need to do that on, and this was actually raised last year to help us do that. We are proposing to raise the fees. As you can see, they're not all doubling. For example, the industrial warehouse space is actually proposed to go down, and that's a basis of when we do the new calls for service calculation, that particular category had less as a percentage. So while we're increasing the rates, we have to do it in the proportion of the call volume. So if you were to approve this, for example, the industrial warehouse space number would actually decrease, and I'll show you that in a little bit. We took some basic examples of what this would mean to the individual property owners. You can see that the commercial rate would go from $300 to $515. The industrial warehouse owner would go down about $20. The institutional would go from $800 to $1,230. And the nursing home number would be very large, $10,000 to $18,600. Now, we get asked this every year, and I will answer it again before you ask, which is we can't play with these percentages. If you want us to increase the fee, the way it works is this is how much we collect now, this is how much we'll collect in the future, and you have to divide it back by raising the rates equally. You can't, for example, just say, well, we're not going to do nursing homes. You have to do it in that proportion. 2018 fire assessment fee raised about $4.2 million. After early payment discounts, we collect around $3.9 million. The proposed fee will double that, not quite double it, go from 3.9 to 6.9 million a year. Now, I gave you don't have it in the presentation, but one of the questions you asked, and I'm going to apologize how complicated it is, but this is the way our accounting works. Basically, the fire assessment fee is used to actually pay for equipment. And because we borrow money to buy equipment, we borrow money to do fire stations, this money basically comes into the fire assessment fund and gets allocated to, for example, if you look at the sheet here, 2012 leased fire vehicles principal. Well, that's fire trucks that we bought on lease that we are now repaying with the fire assessment fee. The same for fire station 4, 5, and 8. And that'll also be true when we do Station 9. The bottom line is from the slide that I showed you previously, which I will go back to. Where is it? Hold on. That slide.
That's what you said.
Even by raising this fee to the amounts that we're talking about, even generating $6-7 million a year in fire assessment fees, we still won't be covering just the capital costs, not even getting into the discussion of the service costs, the operating costs of providing fire protection to the properties in the city. We have spent and continue to spend around $31 million that we need to, if possible, recover using portions of the fire assessment fee. And so this number at $6.9 million a year still won't recover all the costs that we're incurring to build out these stations, to do the fire training facilities. So back to Commissioner Shove's point, staff recommends that this number will help us. It will help us to continue to grow. We just had a discussion of $300 million in capital projects that we don't have money for. By not raising the fire fee, we're just adding additional things we need to do to the fire department to that unfunded category that we'll have to decide where we fund. So again, it's staff's recommendation that we move forward with this fee, and I'll take questions.
Commissioner Peduzzi?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question. Now, the difference between the fire assessment fee as opposed to a tax, does the fire assessment fee apply to institutions in a way, or some institutions in a way that a tax wouldn't, such as government entities, the county?
Yeah, basically, we
churches,
exempted
not-for-profits?
nonprofit entities are exempt from this tax when we from this assessment, that when we set up the ordinance originally, you are allowed to exempt categories from this, but if you do that, then we just redo the calculations. You've already exempted government and nonprofit entities from having to be assessed this fee.
Okay, so it's really not capturing institutions that wouldn't have been included in a tax. It's really the same people are paying, whether it be the tax or a fee.
That's correct.
There's no additional institutions being added onto the roster of.
I think what you're really asking, though, is that unlike a tax, there's no exemption. Usually, some of the residential property can be exempted based on homestead exemptions and so forth. A fire assessment fee does not have an exemption, so every property will pay that fee.
I understand that, but no new institutions or not-for-profits and government entities are all exempted from this, as they are from paying taxes also.
Yes.
Commissioner Shove?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the data on where these funds are spent. I think that's really important. Like I said, I think it's extremely important for us as a city, as we're going, to make sure that when somebody picks up the phone to dial 911, we have a great response time to those emergencies, not only for the people involved in that emergency, but also for the benefit of everyone in insurance ratings. At the bottom of the sheet that you gave us for 2018 and projected 2019, there's a number of transfer to other funds. What is Fund 210, 507, 304? It represents about $2.8 million.
I knew you were going to ask me that.
2.7.
210 is a debt service fund. So in effect, we took it out of the fire assessment fee, put it in the fund that pays the debt for fire stations, not capital leases. So we did we took out lines of credit to build Fire Station 4 and Fire Station 8 and Fire Station 9, and that money was going to be transferred to pay the debt service on the debt that was set up for those stations. And I apologize for being so complicated, but that's just how government accounting works. 304 is a capital improvement fund. So when we actually when Kevin decides he's going to spend money on a capital item, the money to do that goes into a fund so that we can account for the spending of that capital. And so it's going out of the fire assessment fund to fund Kevin's capital account so that he can actually pay for it. And that would be in a case where it's not borrowed. So I know it's complicated, but that's how it works.
So on this, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Follow up, go ahead.
On the 7-ish million that would be collected in 2019, does that mean the city is getting $7 million worth of fire trucks, equipment, staff? It's going towards the bottom line of when I'm picking up the phone and calling, that I am getting better equipment, better capital, fire stations, et cetera, all those things.
It's meant to do that, but don't, we've already borrowed the money to do some of these stations, so yes, it's going to repay some of that, and it also will be used for new equipment.
If I may,
Another follow-up?
just one more. Thank you for this information. Is it possible that going forward, we could get quarterly updates of where money's being spent? And if possible, in a little bit more layman's terms, so that we understand, even if you're back funding things that are making payments towards equipment already purchased, it would be nice to be able to send that to residents.
I recognize that we should take this schedule and actually, irrespective of what fund it went in, you really want to know this money spent
Categories.
On this. Yeah,
Give us categories.
We'll certainly do that.
Thank you.
Because I'm still not clear, because you're throwing out numbers about what was collected,
Well, here's the problem.
I need something
Yeah, I
showing me
understand.
what was collected
Okay.
from last year's fire assessment fee and the categories of expenditures.
Okay.
Very simple, and that should zero out.
I will give you an example that makes that complicated, but I understand what you're after. So if we've spent $8 million on Fire Station 4, we didn't have $8 million in fire assessment fees, so only a portion of that went to repay a portion of Station 8. Then we got money from other places.
Listen, we collected a certain amount.
We did.
And we spent a certain amount.
We did.
I want you to tell me what we collected and where the money went.
No problem.
Commissioner, Madam President.
Thank you. I want to go back to Commissioner Paduzzi's question about the institutional property. Chief, maybe you're going to preempt my question?
Yeah, and perhaps, just in addition to what we think of an institution, like an asylum or a hospital or something like that, I have a list of some other examples that maybe wouldn't be exempted properties. So education, maybe, I'm not sure if all the schools, but it's educational property. Other schools, adult schools, preschools, elementary schools, those are all government, but private colleges is another one.
And are you saying that these would be assessed the fee or would not?
I would say, I don't know, but we would have to look on the property appraiser, but these are examples of things, like, I would imagine the courthouse is one of those exempted properties. However, a private preschool in the south end, I would say would be taxed. Some others are substance abuse recovery centers, development disability facilities, hospices, clinics, infirmaries, clinic types, so what do they call them, urgent cares, those types of things are institutions according to the letter of the law.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify because I cannot remember which meeting it was at, but there was a community meeting where it was asked about institutional property. It was asked, I don't even know if it was asked. It was shared with us that properties who don't pay property taxes would still be assessed this fine and would carry their fair share, and that was used as a reason to justify this fee. So that is not the case?
I'm kind of
Sorry,
confused
I
on the
know.
question. Well, so certain properties that don't meet the homestead exemption, for example, someone who's had a condo for a long, long time and it's not worth $100,000, they wouldn't pay property taxes, but they would still be responsible for the fee.
Yeah, I guess it was that at a community meeting, it was shared with us that there are some properties that don't pay taxes and not homestead exemption related, but
Okay.
churches, nonprofits, but that do get fire services, and that this would be a way for them to help offset some of those services because they don't pay taxes that also contributes towards the payment of those services. So
unless
I just
they-
want to clarify, they still would not be paying. the
Unless
fee.
they change their business type since last year's taxes, it would be the same people getting the assessment.
Okay, okay.
Although if you are homesteaded, you still pay this fire
We
assessment.
do.
Maybe that's what they were talking about.
I will get you a list so that you can see a more clear list of who's exempted and who's not, because it is a little confusing, because as she said, like, a daycare may be an education facility, but it's not exempt from this tax. The government of, the county doesn't pay it.
Okay.
I had another question unrelated to that.
Okay, let me go back to a question I had. When can we get that statement I asked for?
Oh, I'll have it the next day. I'll get it to you well before the hearing.
Thank you. Yes.
I had a question about the $231 that you're saying we could assess based on the study.
Yes.
Is that, I'm glad you're on this slide actually right here, is that a derivative of this amount, that 31 million?
See,
How did we get to that 231?
The $20 million number is the allocation is a 5-year average of capital costs and operating costs that would be allocable to providing fire prevention services. And that's the number that the study came up with that said, if you look back and you look, at what we spent over the last 5 years, This is the average cost to provide this service. That's the number that we're dividing out to come up with the maximum. You have to do studies, much like you do for stormwater. You have to do a rate study, in effect, and that's how that was determined.
Any other questions? Okay, you can continue. Is that it?
That's it. August 26th is the hearing date, 5 p.m. And we will provide that schedule to you as soon as we can.
Thank you. Okay, thank you
Mayor,
very much. Yes.
I didn't realize we were finished, so before we finish, just, I just want to clarify, just because we all have constituents that are coming to us saying that they're absolutely against, this fee, that we already, pay enough in taxes, and I look and I see the list that you all put together that indicates that we're among the lowest of those that you've looked at. I think there's a number that you probably haven't looked at, those departments that are right around us, such as Palm Beach County, such as some of the departments in our immediate area, municipal departments. Can we say to our constituents that we are unique in the fact that we have burdens on our department that other departments don't have because of us having a dynamic downtown and because of maybe the fact that we do have so many public, not-for-profits, government entities as the county seat that those other cities don't have, which makes something like this necessary that may not be necessary in other municipalities?
Absolutely. Commissioner, we have 2 railroads, interstate highway. We back up the port. We're first due hazmat to Mar-a-Lago, Port of Palm Beach. We have a unique situation in this city. We have every 3-letter acronym government agency that you can imagine, federal, state, county courthouses. We have, we do see a dramatic increase in call volume during the season, especially out off of Presidential Way. We have traffic accidents. We're an all-hazards fire department. We have dive rescue, technical rescue. If we have a window washer dangling off a 30-story building, that's us. Crane rescue. We went and helped with a crane rescue in Riviera Beach. If somebody's stuck in the hull of a ship at the port, that's us. So our department provides a variety of services. Aside from probably large animal rescue, we just haven't gotten to try it yet. We'll rescue anything, anywhere, anytime. All hazards, and that's one of the things that separates us out from other fire departments.
If I could follow up, we're one of the few agencies that has a hazmat, capability, correct?
Yes, sir. There are 4 in Palm Beach County that are funded through, partially by Solid Waste Authority, and they're geographically broken up. So Palm Beach County has 2, West Palm Beach has 1, and Delray Boca share another one.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Madam President?
Thank you. Actually, Chief Matty, you mentioned that you saw a 48% increase in calls since 2008. I'm curious if we have forecasted into the next, if we have a way to forecast to know what would be the increase over the next 10 years.
The past several years, it's been about 7 to 10% over time. So in looking forward, that's where staffing is going to come in. That's where opening this additional station has come in. We had more clerical staff in 1994 when I started at this fire department than we do now. Those are some of the things that we need not only to keep pace with the blinky lights and the wheels going down the road, but to shore up the foundation of the fire department and grow as the city's growing. So, those are some of the things we have to look at as well. And in that forecast, some of the things that we've been asking for is, additional staff to shore up those growing needs. Because we can't put everything into the emergency response side without backing it up on the other side.
Commissioner Sho?
Thank you. And I just want to follow up to that because I know we all have heard a lot of comparisons, and I think I use caution when doing comparisons of West Palm Beach to other cities because to me, not all fire departments are created equal. I think our fire department is above board, and so when we look at the kinds of calls and the call volume that our city has to respond to versus our neighbors, there's really not a good data point that's going to show you that. And when somebody shows up at my door, when I dial 911, I want them to be prepared to deal with whatever they're coming into. And so I think when we take into consideration the kinds of training that each one of our personnel has to go through as compared to others, I think we're more highly trained, and I think we're ready to respond respond to a lot of different things. So it's hard to compare city to city, I think, whenever we're looking at a diverse need from our citizens and a diverse training from the personnel that we have. So, I think I use caution in doing that and look at the call volumes that we have coming in. So, quality versus quantity, whenever we're doing those comparisons, I would caution.
There's a interesting saying, and it's kind of prevalent throughout the fire service, that, the public expects a strong brain surgeon, psychiatrist, plumber, electrician, mechanic to show up at your house and fix whatever the problem is. And that's what people do when it's not a law enforcement issue. If there's a duck in a storm drain, or cat had kittens in a wall, it's the fire department that comes to that. Not to mention the weak, weary, and wounded, and car accidents, and all those other things. So, jack of all trades in some instances.
You got anything? Okay. Thank you very much. Very fine presentation, and I look forward to getting that information from you. We look forward to getting that information from you, Mr.
Right
Green.
away.